Donaldson here with the Contemporary Gentleman. In this video we are talking about the HK45 Tactical and the HK45 Compact Tactical. Both guns I consider to be 45 combat handguns. So, if you're interested to see this comparison, let's dig in. So getting right into the meat and potatoes, the HK45 basically came from the USP45 Tactical. And it's kind of funny because it's the most sensitive if you compare the USP45 Tactical, the Mark 23, to this. It's got the most usable rail, it's got the best ergonomics, things that make sense up here as far as, you know, the controls being slightly smaller, still completely usable, just as much so as the other guns, but a little smaller. Yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's a lot of people's least favorite, to include myself. I mean, it's a fantastic gun if I was issued it, if I was gifted it, if I inherited it. I would never sell it, I would keep it. It's an awesome gun, but at the end of the day, if you're wanting some sexy 45 from H&K, this is probably your last choice between the four main ones. The USP45 Tactical, Mark 23, the HK Compact Tactical, and then this one. Which in my video on them, you'll see that that's the case. This is my least favorite, but again, it's like saying which is your least favorite Ferrari. Maybe they did make some bad ones. Anyway, I digress. 10 round capacity, yeah, that's basically it. Now the HK45 Compact Tactical, sometimes, you know, it really depends on the day, which I think is best looking. This, the Mark 23 USP45 Tactical, some days this I think is the best. It's an 8 to 10 round capacity. These extended magazines, which I used to think were ugly, and they've really grown on me. Again, I think this is a fantastic looking weapon system. That said, military use, this is also known as the Mark 24. A lot of people don't know. I don't remember specifically which branch used it, but it was selected because of its versatility, being able to be used in a compact scenario. And the X300s weren't, I don't think, as prolific at the time, so the fact you couldn't mount one on it wasn't as abhorrent as it is now. That said, as you can see, I have one. I have a, I'll include a link found on Reddit, website that sells these little 3D printed pieces that fit into an X300. Has to be the Bravo though, so I did have to buy a new light. And they also have a method of connecting a TLR1. So if you want your favorite full-size light, which is probably one of those two lights, on your Compact Tactical, or you haven't bought a Compact Tactical because you can't do it, now you can buy it because you can. So anyway, back to military lineage. So anyway, this is known as the Mark 24. Again, super cool, runs great, and we're going to talk about it. As far as anything else, it's the only one in this whole 9-gun competition that's really concealable. Maybe you could do a 220, maybe a Glock 21. That's kind of it as far as most of them go. So, let's move on. Now, comparing all these guns on paper initially, when I was like, what 45 do I want to buy? And I thought, well, I could do a video after acquiring a bunch of them and see which one I want to keep or would keep. So, on paper, really, round count and size are the main things separating these. I mean, the grip's a little bit, the ergonomics, but honestly, I think and we'll talk about it in a minute, but the Compact, I think I handle a little bit better than I do the actual 45. Now, till recently, there was no X300 able on it, so that's really how I'd kind of shut it out. Now, this will just take anything, and the fact that you can't put an optic on them without milling them, some people might not want to do. So what they could do with this gun, the 45, is just mount and something with an IR laser, like an XVL2 from Surefire. This you cannot. However, I mean, these go pretty consistently $600-700 on Gunbroker, whereas the MSRP is like $1,100 or something, or $1,200. So it's really like you could just mill it and put an acro on it. It's not a big deal. Probably something I would do, because to me, to be a real night vision gun, you really need an acro on it, or any red dot that's good, RMR, what have you. So this does have that benefit. So again, this is the most sensible one. I just laugh about it because it's like no one, including myself, would choose it over the other ones. Anyway, moving on from there, getting into ergonomics, the grip feels more ergonomic with the HK45. It's kind of like gripping clay or Play-Doh and then releasing your fingers. But yet at the same time, and I think it has to do with the slide length, I typically, if they're very similar guns, so like Glock to Glock or these HKs because they're so similar and you still have a good grip with the 10 round magazine, I typically shoot the shorter slides better. And so my control is just a little bit better on the Compact Tactical. And I would say my grip is equal on both, just because it necessarily feels a little nicer on this one. The other one still feels great, and I'm getting just as good a grip. As far as balance, they both balance really well. I think that the HK45 Compact Tactical balance slightly better with the can on it. Other than that, they both balance pretty evenly, I would say. Now getting into function and integration into my system. My holsters that I use primarily are going to be X300 oriented, so great on that account. They'll both do it. Dimensions, neither really is a problem. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, the magazines all go into double stack S-Tack mag holders. I had to push them in a little harder than I do some of the Glock ones, but not a big deal. So yeah, I wouldn't have, basically the point of this part is that I don't have to go buy a bunch of new stuff just because I'm bringing on a weapon system. So getting into triggers, they're both great and about equal. I was doing it earlier and maybe there's a little more take up on the single action, but really the way I do the trigger, also my finger tends to drag along the bottom of the trigger guard, which I don't really care for. And it's just how I get in there. Now the double action is very smooth. So I do like that a lot. And it's smooth on both, is what I'm trying to say. Now, getting into caveats and variables. So Unsuppressed, they ran just like any H&K does, flawlessly. For that matter, didn't have ammo hookups either. AAC 230 grain is what I ran through it, and some Federal Syntac 230 grain. I tried the Federal because I read online, I know, idiot, that it was cleaner for suppressors, and the opposite is true. So I ended up really just shooting AAC through the suppressor, and then I burned through the Syntac as fast as I could. I think my personal preference, I would almost say a toss-up, but really at the end of the day, I'm going to be going with the Compact Tactical, just, you know, for most things. I don't know what is different about the trigger guard. I guess the mag releases are a little different, so it just, I control a little better, and then we'll get into the timer drills, but, you know, thus far getting into it, is really, especially with the God-given ability to put an X300 on it, that really rounded it out. It may not have won this competition if it weren't for that. Suppressed, both ran great. They really sounded about the same. I was kind of curious if the shorter barrel was going to do much, but you know, on the enormous Dead Air Primal, I didn't really notice the difference. Now I did get a little more stuff on my face, probably because you're not getting a full burn, but that's really been in the humid months in Kansas. When it was kind of colder out, I didn't really notice it so much. So also, if you haven't gotten a can, you're going to get another can anyway. You can probably find a more flowy 45 cal can. I'm still waiting for more information on the Mojave 45. I would like to think that'll be a candidate, or if CAT comes out with a 45 can, or especially Hux works. That's probably a direction I would go, but that's more tuning the front end than really worrying about the gun too much. So, there's that. Now with gloves, they both ran fine. Like, there's not really anything to report. I didn't really have any issues. The gloves didn't complicate anything. It wasn't easier or harder to use. They just ran, which of course, because they're H&Ks. The magazines, they all ran flawless. What I did like about the Compact is that when I would go to the range and have a bunch of mags loaded, some of these guns, I only have 2 or 3 mags. I'm not going to buy more because I'm, you know, going to be giving the gun back at some point. So there's no point in spending $200 in magazines, right? So some of these guns can use other magazines from the other guns. I don't remember which way it goes, but Mark 25 to, or Mark 23 to USP 45. One can take both mags and the other one can only take its own mags. I think the USPs don't go in the Mark 23, but whatever it is. Anyway, the 10-round HK45 magazines go in this baby no problem, so I can have 6 mags ready to go anytime. Granted, 2 of those were 8 round, but if I own this gun, I would definitely round out a collection, have probably at least 3 of the 10-rounders, if not maybe 5 to 7. And then I may have 2 8-rounders, but sometimes what I'll do is I'll have magazines for shooting and the magazines for carry. And before some armchair warrior in the comments comes in and talks about how I should circulate my mags, That's not actually how metal works, and I really wish the industry didn't go into this, but tidbit, which I mentioned in other videos, metal loses its strength through constant use. So if you're constantly using magazines in the range, you don't want to cycle those into your concealed carry line because those springs have been weakened more than a magazine with rounds sitting in it all the time. It's science, it's physics, it's metallurgy, and it's also backed up by people like Pat McNamara. So people who very much know what they're talking about, plenty more than me from a military standpoint, back that up. And then again, so does my background in metallurgy and manufacturing. So anyway, I would have, maybe a couple 8-round mags for carry, constantly loaded with defense loads, and I have a couple for practice just to make sure I'm still jiving with the 8-round magazines. Anyway, I digress on the magazines. They're all good. Getting into the shot timer. They both performed nearly the same as far as times and group sizes, yet one stood out slightly more. Now let's discuss the bill drill. All right, getting into the bill drill. The HK45 had slightly better times, but I was more accurate and I had better groups with the compact. So there's that. Now, it was close enough that if enough reasons put me leaning toward the HK45, just get some rounds down range and you're going to clean that up. Just because you naturally jive with one gun doesn't mean you can't make another one fit. What you have to call into question is it worth it making it fit, right? So like I had, the USP45T, I didn't shoot that as well as a Mark 23. But when I'm saving over $1,000, if we're talking MSRP, that's plenty of rounds to get my skill with the USP45 Tactical up to snuff. So just an example there. Now, the Mozambique, the HK45 Compact, 2 torso shots, A-zone, and yet the headshot was not as good as the HK45 Tactical. The Tactical had a tighter group, but not everything was in the A-zone, which I'm not shooting these at 7 yards, just to be clear. I'm trying to kind of really milk out the differences between the groupings, and it'd be really much harder to tell at 7 yards. So I am pushing it back, depending on which guns I'm comparing or what I'm doing. I'm anywhere from like 15 to 25 yards back. Usually not 25, but anyway. Now, the HK45 Tactical, it did, again, kind of have a faster time, but, I don't know if I just had my foot on the gas with it more, if it was easier to have my foot on the gas, but then I definitely exhibited more control. Now, the times, too, they're well less than a second. So you're talking about, and usually my first round shots, let me see if I can look at them here. My first round shots are pretty close together. So, when you're thinking about dumping 6 rounds or, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, those first rounds are really landing at the same time. So, splits of a second between those second and third shots or second to 6th shot isn't as much of a factor. If I really did that because of some wild difference between 2 guns, I'm like, wow, I really, don't jive with that gun. But anyway, moving along. All in all, when it comes to competition, it was too close to call, really, although, my deficiencies far outweigh the inherent issues with the guns. I will say that. I shoot a fair amount. I do the timer, I do practical exercises, but I'm not like some crazy competition shooter. So I do understand, too, that there's definitely a human element that's part of the problem. Part of the solution, but also part of the problem. Now, that said, in my mind, looking at the results, the HK45 Compact Tactical does weed out the HK45 Tactical just enough. Now, let's get into the close. First and foremost, the HK45 Compact Tactical is my favorite simply based on the aesthetics of the two. I just love the look. Coincidentally, it is also the winner of this face-off. For me, the HK45 Compact Tactical is the winner by only a slim margin. It was faster, grouped better with shooting drills. Though the 8-round mags caught on my hands, especially with gloves, I have the option to run the 10-rounders all the time, which, don't have that problem. Additionally, there is finally a way to get an X300 to mount to it, which removes that advantage of the HK45 Tactical. Otherwise, I could see it possibly winning this. Though it doesn't matter much, the HK45 Compact Tactical is ever so slightly more wieldy with a can on the end. What's more, simply a bonus, the HK45 Compact Tactical can be configured for concealment. So, it will go on to face the USP45 Tactical. So this has been James Donaldson with the Contemporary Gentleman, and until next time, keep your composure.